Welcome to the Building Blocks of Staff Wellness webinar, exploring SafetyNet accreditation, a correction-specific wellness accreditation program. I'm Steve Mayotte, the Chief Operating Officer here at Desert Waters, and I'll be the host for the webinar. Our first presenter is Dr. Katerina Spinaris. Katerina is the founder of Desert Waters Correctional Outreach and a licensed professional counselor. She develops wellness curriculum for correctional staff, and she's trained thousands of staff and has counseled with staff and families and conducts research on ways to lessen corrections fatigue and increase corrections fulfillment. Stephanie Rawlings is our next presenter. Stephanie is Desert Waters Chief Innovation Officer. She has 12 years of correctional experience with expertise in the area of developing, implementing, and overseeing staff wellness programming in large correctional organizations. She's previously served as the Staff Wellness Program Administrator for the Illinois Department of Corrections. Greg Morton. Greg is Desert Waters Research Advisor. He's worked for a state corrections system for over 30 years, retiring as the Administrator for Staff Training and Professional Development. He holds a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, concentrating on work-related stress and trauma and their impact on first responders. And lastly, we have Dave Taylor. David is the leading consultant with Pursuit of Excellence. He's previously served 32 years in corrections and law enforcement, and he currently works with agencies in the U.S. and around the world on policy development and accreditation. Thank you to all the presenters for being with us, and we will get into the content.
Greetings all from Florence, Colorado. We're gathered here today united in our pursuit of correctional staff wellness. And as someone who's lived and breathed correctional staff wellness for the past 21 years, I cannot tell you enough in words how much this moment means to me, what a fulfillment of a dream and a vision it's been. And thank you for your enthusiasm, your engagement, your interest, your investment in correctional staff wellness and pursuing it diligently. So thank you also for caring, period, and for the sacrifices you make personally to serve in this line of work. So just a little bit about Desert Waters now. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. It was established in the year 2003. And our story begins back in the year 2000 when I moved to a county in Colorado, Fremont County, that at the time had 12 prisons and 1 jail. And I started getting introduced to the correctional workforce culture and the impact of the job on the worker. And I felt compelled and constrained to step up and do something about it. And after much struggling about the thought, I did. So nonprofit Desert Waters was established as a nonprofit in the year 2003. And our mission has been the well-being of correctional staff and their families and the health of the agencies where the staff work. And we pursue our mission primarily through research and research-based training. And we conducted groundbreaking research starting in the year 2012, establishing prevalence rates of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms in the corrections ranks and all professions in corrections, and then developing trainings to address wellness issues, resilience, family, etc. And now we are doing it with the staff wellness program that we'll be presenting to you today. So thank you, and on to Stephanie.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to turn to the subject about the current realities of correctional staff wellness and why this is a mission critical matter. And I'd like to add today that we're going to be talking about organizational wellness, not individual staff's wellness. And by that, I mean that we're going to discuss what programs agencies are putting in place or to put in place that provide staff help to support their well-being. And these measures constitute the building blocks of wellness at the organizational level. So again, we're not going to be talking about individual employee wellness or what they can do to become healthy. So we're first going to talk about the concept of wellness. We use the term wellness freely and casually, but in reality, that notion of wellness is a really complex concept. And so what it actually means can be really evasive and hard to pin down. A recent review reported 12 somewhat different definitions of wellness in 12 different research studies and articles. So there's really no uniform agreement to date as to what wellness refers to. And like a diamond, there are many dimensions to wellness. And so it's also hard to operationalize wellness when we're struggling to define it as well, and to translate that from an abstract concept into practical ways that we can measure and promote wellness. In addition, the notion of occupational wellness, the well-being of employees in the workforce, is a fairly new area of study and hasn't really been looked to really in depth by employers, and is an even newer area of study and pursuit in the career field of corrections. And that all of that is to say, it's just a highly complex area to venture into. It's not an area where we can just pull things together without a plan or without expertise. So we're going to take a look at the state of correctional staff in relation to wellness. And sadly, working in corrections, we see that those conditions are dominated by understaffing, and other occupational stressors inevitably chip away at staff wellness. So research conducted by several different entities over the years has shown alarmingly high rates of staff reporting mental health disorder symptoms and other health conditions due to their working conditions. So to dive into that a little bit further, we've got some statistics put up here that have been collected by valid screening instruments. But it's important to note that these statistics were based on self-reports, which we often know are lower than actual data. So these levels of reported unwellness are truly shocking. They indicate the high numbers of custody staff that may be suffering from some serious mental health symptoms while they're expected to conduct operations that require incredibly high levels of self-control and interpersonal skills, as well as good decision making and other abilities. So these rates exceed those of the general public and even other first responders. So there are some current realities about these conditions. And first of all, it's no surprise that these symptoms can impair staff's functioning. And that may manifest through anger outbursts, aggression, forgetfulness, and more. And that's just the first reality. And that's why staff wellness is mission critical. Unwell staff cannot operate in ways that fulfill their agency's mission. And then secondly, correctional agencies tend to respond to these realities of staff unwellness by offering a variety of wellness initiatives that are often done piecemeal and maybe without guidelines or valid grounds as to why they choose one approach over another, and with no input from stakeholders at times. And when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about staff and their families, and maybe even without evidence as to what helps and what doesn't help. And so that means that the need is great, but the response has not been meeting the need adequately to this point. There is no guidance or structure on how to promote staff wellness, and there are no standards to date to follow or to aspire and meet. So there's not a lot of input sought from the staff as to what they believe they need from their employer to be well, and really no way to evaluate the program effectiveness. However, agencies should be commended for stepping up and beginning to offer staff wellness program and increasing them beyond the employee assistance program. And agencies really are on their way. They're realizing that this is a mission critical matter, and we very much want to commend the efforts that agencies are making in that area. And now Greg's going to tell us more.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to do a quick summary of some of the things that Stephanie said that led us to the decision-making process where SafetyNet was, wherein SafetyNet was designed. First thing I want to say, though, is that it is an honor to be here with you all. Thank you for the work you do. Not always recognized. Of course, we say that very frequently, unless you've been there, and then you know. And so just for starters, like I said, it's an honor to be here with you, and hopefully this information today will provide some value. And also, just to reinforce what Steve had said in the beginning, as you have questions, please enter them on the chat function. We will have time at the end of the presentation to deal with questions, to handle questions, and resolve some issues with you, perhaps. Anyway, so that's a quick reminder there. So when we started, well, a better way to put it would be, Desert Waters has been promoting employee wellness for decades. But as the research on human wellness, not just wellness in an organization, and certainly not just correctional wellness, has increased, the question of what does that mean becomes more and more complicated. You know, you probably think that it would be necessary to have a physical wellness element in a wellness plan. Okay, well, how do you operationalize that? You operationalize that through weightlifting, through running, through yoga, pickleball, city league basketball teams. It's different for everybody, especially given the variety of individuals that work in a correctional setting. What about emotional wellness? Well, is that interpersonal wellness, like the statistics that Stephanie quoted, or is that more like a relational, social wellness? And if so, is that at home or is that work? Is that at work? So the more we did research into this whole concept of wellness, the more complicated it got. You'll have a handful of references for this presentation at the very end, and will be included in the video. And then the second problem that overlaps with this, as we were trying to figure out how to solve or how to deal with employee wellness, is just the severity of correction staff unwellness as captured by those numbers. And so I'd just like to stop here for a second and say, yeah, the numbers are important, but what we're really talking about here are the people you work with, your colleagues, your coworkers. And for just a second, as we're passing through this section here, if you could capture a couple of names or faces, this is who we're talking about. And this is what SafetyNet is all about. So the conclusion, after we put those two big problems together, was decide that, you know, there needs to be more than just training. I don't mean to say just training, but there needs to be more than just training. And in the solution line, provide wellness programming built on standards based on rigorous criteria. I know you're not supposed to read what's on the PowerPoint, but each one of those words is important. What we've done in examining the complexity of wellness is science-based, is research-based. The rigorous criteria concept, we have followed that all the way through. The standards then, based on that rigorous criteria, some of the academic research comes from other professions. Hasn't been a lot of corrections wellness research done yet, but we have interpreted that and built those into the standards as we could. And then the programming, that's the building block notion that this webinar is based on. You can go ahead, Steve. Is that putting those together, putting those various initiatives together is where SafetyNet came from. So isolated wellness initiatives are necessary but not sufficient. Wellness is different for everybody, and it's different for us as we age, what stage we are in our career. It's different for a new employee than for somebody who just got promoted to supervisor. It's different for a tactical team member versus somebody who works in a different part of the facility. So the notion of wellness, again, I'm just quoting Stephanie, is multifaceted and comprehensive. And then the building block notion is where we intended to build a systematic approach to meeting these goals. The multifaceted, comprehensive notion of wellness can be overwhelming. And so what we tried to do was develop an organized process of standards and subheadings to the standards, which we will get to here before too long, that help an organization take the incremental steps that are necessary to meet that broad wellness scope. And as we were doing that, we came to the conclusion, came to our awareness that in addition to that, what we're doing is what SafetyNet is doing is providing an external review of objectivity and accountability of an agency's processes. And that can be helpful. We'll talk about liability before we get done here, but that can be helpful just to have a third-party review of the things that an organization does, especially a third party, I will say like Desert Waters, that has contacts with so many correctional organizations. One of the things that we built into SafetyNet, I'm jumping ahead and stealing one of my partner's points here, but one of the things that we build into SafetyNet is staying in contact with you as an agency as you're developing your SafetyNet, your wellness program. So that's the summary. That's what led us to the design. And here we are. Let's have Katerina, is it, I believe, to talk next about the actual accreditation program.
Yes, thank you, Greg. So Greg just spoke about why we need an accreditation program, the accountability that comes with it, the objectivity, the comprehensiveness, the rigorousness. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about how to use what the program, like an accreditation program, brings to the table, how to use the building blocks of such a program to create a wellness program in your agency to fit your employees' needs. So one thing I want to say to begin with is that we called it SafetyNet because we want it to be like a safety net that will catch people so that nobody falls through the cracks. And we try to be very holistic on 2 levels, and we'll go over it in some detail in the next couple of slides. First of all, we based the intrapersonal, the personal parts of wellness on SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness, starting with social, emotional, spiritual, then intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, and occupational. And the various standards describe which or state which of these they are relevant to and address. And then we have a bunch of other criteria that we based SafetyNet on that bring its unique value to the fore. And one thing I want to say up front is that there is no other accreditation program for wellness that I am aware of anywhere at this point yet, but the severity of the correctional staff's condition is such that we have to have a rhyme and a reason and bring things together under an umbrella and not just have them be piecemeal. So it's a holistic program covering things, as many areas of wellness as we can identify. It's data-driven, based on the research findings, and if there are no research findings to date, based on best practices, based on experience at this point, and we state what is what, then it's systematically organized. There is a rhyme and a reason why a standard is there and what purpose it serves. It's not like a yard sale throwing a bunch of stuff together. There's an organization to it. It's comprehensive in terms of whose needs it addresses, like active staff with both custody and non-custody, retirees, people just about ready to retire, family members, and trying to address the needs of both institution staff, prison and jail, and also probation and parole community staff. We tried to make it correction specific, meaning being aware of the specifics of the corrections workforce culture and needs and issues and challenges, and address them directly instead of borrowing from another profession and trying to make them fit in a correction setting. And it has, to me, very importantly, it has built-in outcome measures, because up to now, what we have seen in most places is that there are initiatives, wellness initiatives, and again, we commend people for doing them. That's wonderful, but there is no sense about what's working and what's not working, what needs to be amended, what needs to be added or subtracted. There is no feedback enough to tweak and improve a system that is provided. And we built SafetyNet on the basis of input from all stakeholders, from frontline staff, administrators, union members and leaders, families, retirees, again, to get people's input about what they believe they need and what they think works and what they are able and willing to do. And another way we're comprehensive is that we are looking at contributions to wellness in 3 different, very important ways. One is top-down, what an administrator can do, top-down through policies primarily, to breathe wellness into their system, to promote wellness. That's probably in a way the most powerful approach, top-down, and we tend to overlook it. We tend to expect the horizontal bottom up to carry the load. By horizontal, we mean how staff treat each other, the culture they have in their interactions, how they behave around each other. And the bottom up is when we give people tools and say, do this to help your well-being. And staff, yeah, they can do a bunch of breathing exercises and they can do a lot of other things, but sometimes one policy can take a lot of those stressors away or minimize them so they don't have to battle them as intensely. So it's important to have all 3 components of wellness initiatives being fed into the system. SafetyNet provides resources per standard and shows people a variety of options. And of course, we're always welcome to have your input and you tell us about things we have no idea about, and then we can vet them and add them to our list. We are coming alongside the agency. We don't want to kind of throw something at them and say, we'll see you in 3 years. We want to walk with them and help them make decisions because this is a complicated area. And also we are working on having it be adaptable to all agencies, flexible, so the people don't have to say, oh, somebody doesn't have to say, well, there's no way I can do this, and walk away and not step in and start building. We want people to start building. And all our materials, by the way, are on safetynet.desertwaters.com, or just go to desertwaters.com and you see it under accreditation. You can see the standards. You can see the annotated bibliography with all kinds of references per standard. Many pages. You can see FAQs, you can see an accreditation guide, all kinds of information, the agency assessment questionnaires, etc. So we put it out there so that people can benefit from them, even if they don't dive in full tilt to begin with, at least be informed as to the direction in which they want to be going. And so I like to think of like functional areas of SafetyNet as being like 3 gigantic big blocks that are composed of smaller blocks that are the standards. And we have 3 functional areas. One is the program administration. It's kind of the command center for the whole wellness program. Some people may call it the war room. It has 6 standards, and that they all address the design of the agency's wellness program, what it will take to pull together like people, resources to have a program like that. The next area is the prevention area with 7 standards that addresses work conditions, training, a lot of training, and workforce culture wellness, because we believe that people cannot stay healthy for very long in an unhealthy workforce culture. So the culture is a huge issue to be investing in. And prevention measures are like giving somebody an umbrella before they step out in the rain. Now, the third area is intervention, which has 5 standards, which involves programs, services, and resources. If, for example, somebody gets wet anyway, giving them a hairdryer and towels and just dry set of clothes, how people can kind of bounce back and recover. So we have 18 standards in total in SafetyNet, and Dave will talk about those in a minute, a little more.
All right, well, thank you, Katerina. I just want to briefly echo what Greg said about thanks to those of you who are still in the line of fire. I appreciate you being there. I made it out. There is life after corrections. Sometimes it's not the life that you started it with. And our job, our mission with the SafetyNet is to try to help the people make it from the beginning to get to the point where they can retire and still have some sanity left and make it through their careers. So this is a sacred duty for us. You know, we get to help those of you who are still in it, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So let's dive in and take a look at the standards, kind of the mechanics of how this program operates. So there's 18 standards. They all look kind of like this, kind of show you the brief layout. There's the standard number, there's the title, which functional area it fits in. Wellness dimensions, we briefly covered the 8 dimensions of wellness, and some of the standards are very specific to 1 or 2 or 3 of them. This particular standard has to do with the wellness plan, and it covers all of the dimensions. The wellness plan is going to be kind of your blueprint, your model of how you're going to go about enacting this program. And what you see are 7 separate areas, and it says at a minimum. Some of you are going to have other areas that you want to cover besides these. These really don't tell you what to do or how to do it, but what areas that you need to cover. Starting with a survey of your employees. You know, Katerina mentioned that this was top down, side to side, and bottom up. Programs sometimes have a tendency to be top down and say, you have problems, here's our solutions, without ever asking the people involved, what are you feeling? What do you need? What do you think is going to help? Even if you don't do that, some of those things, it's people value that their input is being asked. And you're going to be doing a survey, and you're going to be looking at what people are saying that they need. You're going to be establishing goals and objectives designed to address the needs that people are meeting. Mike, I liked your question, Mike from Australia, about organizational shift. And I think what we talk about culture and values of the organization. One of the ways you do that is by you ask people, you know, what do you need? Reviewing the programs, looking at the effectiveness of the programs, making sure that everyone is looking at multi-dimensions of wellness, and telling people what's available to them and who it's available to. So this all goes into a very comprehensive wellness plan, which is, I said, one of the 18 standards involved in this. Compliance indicators are what we're going to be looking at when we come to evaluating how well you're doing this. Looking at your surveys, looking at the results, talking to staff. You know, we're going to ask staff, tell us about your agency's wellness plan. And hopefully you hear staff say, man, you know, wellness, we hear about this all the time. They're just so focused on wellness. That's the kind of thing that you're looking for. And that's the kind of things we're going to be asking. And what are your program goals? And how well are you doing what you want to be doing? Comments and justification are kind of what thought process went behind why this is a standard. We spent about a year developing these 18 standards, and it was a very rigorous process. And every standard we were challenging each other on, why is this a standard? Why are we requiring this? Why is this important? Is there something we need to be adding? And when we chopped things out that they just didn't meet the criteria for this is essential, and wound up not being a part of it. So there are some brief areas of justification on here. I also will direct you to the website where we have a very extensive list of research that went into all of these standards, where the research was available. And that's going to be always growing. So for those of you who really are into the why, we got a lot of whys there for you to look at. Standards also covering what we call outcome measures. And it's not enough that we do something. I think it's important that we show that there are some results behind what we're doing. And so we look at things like you're going to be starting off with some baseline surveys with staff, and you're going to be doing it every year. And that's going to really kind of give you a gauge of how well what you're doing is working. Maybe your original plan isn't as good as what you'd like it to be, and this gives you a chance to make some modifications. So it's important that we not only ask staff initially, but we continue to ask them and get their input, and we continue to modify things as we're going along. We're also going to be looking at some more objective data, and not all of this is tied to wellness, but at least parts of it are. And if we have a good, rigorous wellness program, we hope to see decreased use of sick leave. The people who just are exhausted and just can't come to work today, and they need that mental break. Hopefully, we're going to be seeing some diminishment of that. That's going to help you with your staffing issues. That's going to help you with retention, reduce FMLA use, issues like use of force, disciplinary. You know, again, not always tied to wellness, but exhausted staff don't perform at their best. Staff who are mentally stressed don't perform their best. I never did. So it's important that we have programs that can place that can bring that down. And hopefully staff suicides, that's one that we have to work on getting to never. It is just too many cases of staff, and it's kind of the ultimate statement of I just can't take this anymore. And we need to really get this down to where it's not an issue anymore. So let's talk briefly about the stages of accreditation. One of the things that we decided early on, and you've heard a little bit about this, is that SafetyNet accreditation is going to be very collaborative. A wellness program is not going to simply hand you something and say, go do this. And then forget about you. And we're not going to do that with this program. We're not an accreditation program that is going to hand you the standards and say, let us know when you're ready for an audit. We broke this down into 7 stages. First is exploration. And exploration is really you looking at the standards and looking at the accreditation guide and getting a good sense of what SafetyNet is all about. Filling out an agency information form, which kind of gives us to see more about you, and to we can have some discussion about SafetyNet, and is this something that's going to be a good fit for you, and is this something that, you know, how can we make this work? Second stage is going to be agency self-evaluation, and this is really for you to break down the standards really bullet point by bullet point and say, where are we in terms of this right now? What do we have this? We don't, you know, some of you may look at these standards and say, we're not doing any of this yet. We're just starting to talk about wellness, and that's fine. Then we'll start from scratch. Some of you may be doing some of it. Some of you may be doing a lot of it. But a good self-evaluation helps you to see where you are in terms of the standards and get some ideas of what you need to work on. Self-evaluation feeds into action plan development, and we will work with you to develop an action plan of how are you going to do this? What documents do you need to create? What training do you need to bring in? What collaborations, services do you need to link up within the community? What do you need to do in order to be able to make SafetyNet work for you? Fourth step is action plan implementation, and that's probably going to be the longest phase for most agencies. That you need to start doing the things that you know that you need to do. Some of those may be simple. Some of them may be just putting a policy in place. Some of it may take a long time. If you've got to redevelop curricula, if you've got to figure out how we're going to put this training in our existing training program, how are we going to get resources available within our community? You know, this could be months, or in some cases even years, of implementing the full accreditation, the full plan. That's okay. You know, it takes as long as it takes. You want to be thorough and you want to get it done right. We are going to separate out the file review and the site visit. I know a lot of accreditation programs, that's one and the same. We would like to see all of the written documentation first. That way, if there are some issues, if there are things that don't quite meet the standard, if you've got a policy that doesn't meet a standard, it's best that you learn about that before people come out and do an assessment, because it gives you time to fix it. You know, we want you to be successful at this. So we want to be able to look at your written documentation, look at your training curricula, look at your resource guide and all these things, all these documents that you're putting together. And in some cases, you may even want them to be reviewed before you enact them. If this is a big policy change, let's look at it first. You know, let's make sure that it's going to meet all the criteria of the standards before you implement something. Then learn, oh, this isn't quite right. Now we got to go back and we got to redo this and we got to re-push out a policy. It's just going to be easier for everyone, especially you, if we can look at these things first. The kind of last part of this is the agency site visit. And it really is important that somebody involved in this process, and it's typically going to be one assessor spending one day. I'm going to go ahead right now and put my name in for Western Australia. I think that would be an awesome place to visit. To come out and take a look and just see what's going on in the agency. You know, is this really working as well as you say? There is a standard in there on environmental conditions, and you know that's really the only kind of thing that you can see when you're in person. Is this a kind of environment that's conducive to work? How do staff feel about it? What are they saying about it? You know, how do they view their access to it? What is it going, again, circle back to culture. You know, what is the culture with this agency around wellness? You know, is this something you hear about once in the academy and then never again, or is this something that you hear about on a regular basis? Once that's all done and there is a favorable recommendation for accreditation, then it goes to the commission, the SafetyNet Commission to review, and they are the ones who grant accreditation. If at any step along the way we don't feel like that there's sufficient grounds for accreditation, we want to work with you to develop it. Again, we want everyone to succeed. It's very important that everyone be set up for success. So we're going to be working with you all along here, even if we need to come back and look at something again to see that you're successful. So we've divided this into two different phases. The first phase has to do with completion of functional area 1, and that is mostly your written documentation. That's your safety, your wellness plan, your wellness teams, your wellness policies, the space that you're going to devote to it. Once you have those things done, that's really your foundation. And once you have that part done, we're going to look at all of this documentation. We'll do it all remotely. So for the agencies, I know a lot of agencies are using Power DMS. We can do it in that. They will have the standards. Agencies that don't want to do that, we'll make arrangements so that we can see all of these things remotely. Once the foundation is in place, then we will grant what's called provisional accreditation. And provisional accreditation basically says that, okay, you've got this. You know, you've got everything in place to do it. Now you need to start building in all of the programs and the training and the things that you say that you're going to do. Then that part leads into the final file review, the site visit, and eventually of granting full accreditation. We do not expect everyone's wellness program to be the same. In fact, we expect everyone's wellness program to be different. If you remember back from this slide with the standard on wellness plan, it gave you areas that needed to cover. Everyone's initial employee surveys are going to look different. You're going to see common themes, but there's going to be differences. And we want to see agencies develop programs around your agency's needs, your settings, your resources, your challenges. Some places we talk in there about outside resources and things that staff can take advantage of. That's going to be easier some places than others. So you're going to have different capacities, and we know these plans are going to be very different. Two of the standards are optional. They start off with if the agency. One of them has to do with animal intervention assistance programs. We put that in as a standard because in our research on this, a lot of agencies that have done this have found them to be very helpful and very conducive of wellness. But if you do, you have to do it right. So there is a standard on it. The other standard has to do with peer support, and peer support programs are very popular. Peer support programs can be very powerful. However, peer support programs, if they're not done correctly, can do some damage. So we have those in there as optional standards. There's also the ongoing data collection that you're going to be making it work for you, and with our consultation with the agencies all along the way to help you provide guidance and rebuild your capacity.
Thanks, Dave. Again, I'll stop here and comment that it's the chat function is where we're reviewing comments and questions, and we've gone over what a standard looks like now, how many standards there are, the two phases of accreditation, provisional and full accreditation. As you continue to think about your organization, the questions you have that you would like to pass on to us, or the ideas, the suggestions that you've had, which several people have done already. Very nice of you. Now is a good time to do that. We'll be getting to a wrap up here before too long. So I'm just going to do a couple of slides to talk about how a full-blown accredited wellness program might benefit you and your agency. And the key word, again, in this PowerPoint, in this slide, excuse me, is the word potential. The worst thing that we can do with an employee-related program is oversell it. Selling and underdelivered is poking a hole in the bottom of your own boat. So we're not saying that these will definitely happen next Tuesday. They're long-term benefits, but these are the targets that we have looked for as we've designed the standards and the process. Improved workplace culture. The more the conversation about how to do a wellness program initiative happened, the more it became obvious that the culture in your organization is guiding. Jails and prisons are 24/7 operations. There'll be different cultures, potentially different institutions, different shifts. Parole and probation, you're spread geographically. There'll be different cultures there as well. Having the culture support workplace wellness is one of our targets. Morale improvement, evidence to staff that administrators truly care. Another thing that we hear over and over again, and I'm sure you do too, is line staff saying our executive team doesn't know anything about what we do. They've never done what we do. They just write rules and procedures that we have to follow, even though they don't fit. Well, this is clearly and intentionally the opposite. This is the executive team. This is a top-down idea that the executive team saying to the workforce that you are important. Our whole notion about staff are our greatest resource. Yeah, we're putting our feet to the ground on that, and this is how we're going to make that evident to you. And then last of all, on this screen, it's kind of interesting. Can you imagine? Well, a lot of our recruiting happens word of mouth, neighbors, friends, relatives, whatever it might happen to be. Can you imagine a wellness culture in your organization being so positive that you would use it with your neighbors, friends, and family as a reason to come work for your organization? Oh, you ought to come work for us, man. I'm telling you, we take care of ourselves. The organization is taking care of, and then fill in the blank with the operationalized activities that your organization does. But it, I don't know. It would be a very powerful recruiting process. The next slide talks about individual health. I kind of mentioned it earlier in the earlier part of the presentation. Is this personal? Is this relational? Is this family? Is this on the job or at home? Yes, the answer is all of the above. And that's clearly what we've tried to design into SafetyNet that would help you guide your wellness program. And then the last one, reduce staff suicide risk. Dave commented about a zero tolerance notion. That's absolutely the case. I don't know how many of you have had the unfortunate opportunity of going to a staff member's funeral. That's gutting, seeing a coworker say goodbye, end of watch. A staff member who has died by their own hand, that funeral, that has everyone standing around looking at each other saying, what did we miss? What could we have done differently? How did this happen? Well, the answer to at least some of those questions potentially is SafetyNet. That's exactly why we're here. And last of all, organization related benefits. Interesting commentary on the chats about work-related sick leave. I'll just throw in my two little cents here and say that when we ask people in our training programs, what is their primary stress relief strategy? Well, calling off sick always is in the top two. The question I would ask them, would typically try to ask is, are you actually healthier when you come back from that calling off day or weekend or whatever it might happen to be? If the sick leave is related to a health condition, hallelujah. And that's an example of workplace culture, how a workplace culture would support use of sick leave. Reduced probability of staff misconduct or error, which then leads to liability. And again, as we said in the beginning, having an objective third-party review of the policies that you have and your implementation, that can be a liability reduction effort. And so what we're recommending, planning, we're designing in recruitment, retention, staff engagement, the missions that's the workplace culture notion. I'm not just a check mark on the muster board. I'm here to do actual work to meet the mission of the agency. Our agency missions are essentially promises that we've made to our community. And wellness, well, we'll say it again, is mission critical. So I turn it over to Katerina now for the business part of the presentation and the wrap up.
So I'm sure at the back of a lot of people's minds, like, okay, how much does it all cost? It sounds great, but, and so I would just want to say that the bottom line for us is ultimately human lives and quality of human lives, even people's pets' lives, because they all get affected. So we, in 2024, we have the base fee for a facility at an agency at $4,900. That includes 20 hours of consultation, like we talked about, walking alongside, not gonna just throwing you at the standards and say, go meet them. And we provide the staff surveys and basic statistics, file review and agency visit, and that's for a 3-year accreditation cycle. And on top of these costs, we have also additional optional costs that are the travel expenses for the agency site visit. If you want us to write policy or curriculum development or do an actual instructor training or training delivery, or do more advanced statistical analysis of the surveys and outcome measures, that would be an add-on cost. And so pulling it all together now, in conclusion, because of the complexities of wellness, what it's about, and the severity of the correctional staff's condition and wellness, we believe that we need the rigorousness and accountability and structure of a wellness accreditation program. So we don't just fly by the seat of our pants and according to pet projects or whatever it might be. And we have designed and continue to work on, as data come in, SafetyNet to be data-driven, organized, comprehensive, etc., and have those very important built-in evaluation measures, and use the standards over time as building blocks of wellness. And so this is why we're doing this, and this is why we've taken actually 2 years of our lives, the last 2 years, working on this, because we saw that there is a need, that we needed to kind of step up to the plate and try to pull things together. These references refer only to the statistics on the mental health conditions we mentioned earlier. On our site, we have a whole annotated bibliography per standard, research studies per standard that refer to a bunch of different topics, all the standards. And but these are for the mental health condition assessments. And now we come to our Q&A time.
All right, I want to actually dive into a recurring theme here that came up in the chats and the questions. And it's one of the biggest areas and one of the biggest obstacles to staff wellness. And it's been asked various ways, and that has to do with culture. This constantly came back to us into developing the standards. You know, Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Whether you do not have a culture that is supportive, and it starts with the top. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm a retired agency director. It had to start with me. Everything started with me. Everything that happened in that organization was my responsibility. And if there were failures, they were my responsibility. They have to be, it's something that is, we know a supportive culture when we see it. It is very hard to define it, and it can be very hard to implement it. It's one of our obstacles. If you've been around a long time, we can get this culture of maybe you're just too weak to work here. Toughen up. Come on, this stuff happens. Suck it up. Get back into it. If you ever watch any of these shows where law enforcement shows, and you got these people that just get shot at, and some of them may have been hit, and you go around, it's like, you guys good? Yeah, we're good. Let's get back to work. No, that's not how it works in real life. But that's the culture of, yeah, you don't worry about it, toughen up. That's one of the biggest obstacles that we need to get past. And one of the things that we actually talk about with SafetyNet is helping to establish that culture where everyone is supportive of it, particularly with your supervisors, your command staff, and even within the officer level, that everybody is supportive of wellness. Everybody acknowledges this is a problem, and everybody's working together to deal with it. So that's a good chunk, and I was glad to see all of that acknowledgement of it, because yeah, it is a challenge.
Well, thank you everyone for your time today. We do have some questions. I think the presenters see those questions. We have just a couple minutes to field those questions. And like I said, we're going to keep this webinar going for a time. If you need to leave at the appropriate half-hour mark, please feel free to do that. Like I said in the beginning, if you weren't here, if you came in late, this webinar is going to be posted on the Desert Waters YouTube channel, so you'll be able to see it in its entirety there in the coming days. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, we'll jump into some questions and answers. We're getting some questions in the chat. So anyone of our presenters want to field a question? And like I said, we'll keep going here for a little bit, try and answer some questions as we can, and then we'll wrap things up. But this officially concludes this webinar, but we will stick around to field some questions.
This is Greg. I'll jump in and make a comment about that supervisors need to know that it's okay and necessary for frontline staff to take a break. Yes, absolutely. The example I always used to use in training was, you're a correctional officer, you're working in an area, by yourself, maybe a TV room, you've got 25 inmates, something like that. All of a sudden, chairs get knocked over, and you got two guys chest to chest. Whoa, what's going to happen next? You're outnumbered 25-1. You start to step forward, you key your radio, and they break it up and pick up their chairs and go sit in different corners of the room, of the TV room. Nothing happened except what happened internally to the employee. Would it make sense in the current culture, current organizational culture, for that employee to call their shift commander and say, I almost had a fight in the TV room? Did you have a fight in the TV room? No, but I almost did. And then I broke it up. Oh, so you did your job then. That's an example, and then the supervisor brushes it off. That's an example of what's inherent to the profession. And one of the things that SafetyNet does is clarify those inherent consequences that happen even on a good day. And I don't know if that, Caitlin, if that response is on target with what you're saying, and actually it's outside the scope of the SafetyNet conversation, but anyway, yes, supervisors need to know that it's okay and necessary for frontline staff to take a break.
Okay, I'll respond to the question about whether this is an extension of CF2F, the Correctional Fatigue to Fulfillment course, or if that training is included or helpful in this process. It would be one of the trainings that would meet criteria for prevention, the prevention side, the functional area too. Definitely, it's much more than the CF2F course, because we realize that we need a lot more than a training or 10 trainings for wellness. So, but CF2F could be, if an agency chooses to use it, a very good foundational block that breaks through a lot of barriers with staff.
Here's the deal with SafetyNet. You know, we wrote these standards for corrections, and part of that had to do with Desert Waters charter, and part of it had to do with not getting out over our skis too much, getting a foundation in this. But there's nothing, SafetyNet is really kind of structured for correctional settings, but on the other hand, there's nothing about it that says you can't do this with other people in your organization. And the reality is that we talked about that, you know, we work with a lot of, Lonnie and I especially work with a lot of jails. And, you know, jails are typically part of a sheriff's department, and sheriff's department has an enforcement division. And you know, we're not going to ever go into an agency and say, yeah, this is all really great stuff, but you can only use it for the detention staff. You enforcement people, you can't be a part of this at all. There's nothing that says that an organization cannot take this and apply it to people outside of corrections specific environment. We hope to, in the coming months or year or whatever, launch some more law enforcement specific standards, because they have some certain challenges that need to be addressed. But yeah, most of what we talk about in here is something that is certainly can be applied throughout your organization and not just within a corrections environment. Greg?
So this is a response to Joel, who asked about an annotated bibliography. If you're still there, Joel, go to desertwaters.com, click on the SafetyNet link, and then on that link, 2/3 of the way down on the page, you'll see what's it called? Annotated bibliography, I think, is the title. We're over 100 pages now. That means each of the standards has research that has been found to connect to each one of the standards. That includes the reference, how you find the reference, and the abstract that comes from the reference. So the annotated bibliography is online. It's available to anybody at any time. Desertwaters.com, the SafetyNet link, and then annotated bibliography.
And actually, just a little, it's on the site is accreditation. You'll see accreditation, so you click on that. So as far as how many agencies have been accredited at this point, we just rolled it out, obviously, last year. So we have some in the works, but no accreditation yet.
Kind of working from the bottom up here. Brenda talked about staff that have been around for 15, 30 years. You know, and we're talking about change. I mean, there's two things we don't like, okay? We don't like change and we don't like the way things are. This is kind of a paradigm shift for a lot of agencies to really seriously address wellness. And if you're one of those 15 to 30 year ones and you're still there at 30 years, you've developed some survival strategies. They're not necessarily good ones. Maybe they've kept you alive. Maybe they've kept you functioning on a certain level, but it's a profession that takes a toll on everyone. I'll tell you a personal story. And I was about 30 years in, and I was going to retire. Actually retired twice. I liked it so much. Different story for a different time, but was out walking my dogs and with my wife and I had a dog who didn't want to go the direction I wanted to go. And I was standing there and I was pulling on her leash and I was looking at her and saying, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." And I looked at my wife who was staring at me and I said, "I need to retire." And she said, "Yeah." The job takes a toll on you that often you don't see until you're out of it and you look back and you say, "What on earth did I just go through? You know, how did I make it?" I'm one of the lucky ones. You know, I survived. It is hard. And those who grew up with the, you know, if you need a wellness program, you're not tough enough to do this job. They're going to be hard nuts to crack. You're not going to get everybody on board, you know, and we talked early on about organizational versus individual. And there's an individual component of this because it's people who are going to be accessing, excuse me, using these services. But it's agencies making sure that that is available for everyone who wants to take advantage of it and encouraging people to take advantage of it. And I think as culture changes, as people start seeing it and as people start using it, then it will become more acceptable. As officers start seeing sergeants, lieutenants, commanders saying, "Yeah, you know, we have a standard in there about an annual wellness visit," right? A lot of people have an annual physical. A lot of police departments are moving towards that you have an annual sit down with a mental health provider, and it's not optional. We can't tell you what to talk about, but you're going to have it. We don't require it with SafetyNet, but the agency has to offer it. And as people start saying, "You know, I had my annual visit. It was pretty good. It was a good chance to talk about some things. I'm glad I did that. I didn't think it was going to be very helpful, but you know what? It kind of was." And as things like that start to happen, that's when you start to see culture shift. And that's when you start to see people being more accepting of it. Are you going to get everybody on board? Absolutely not. You know, nothing like this is ever going to be universally accepted. But culture changes one person, a few people, maybe those people that everybody looks up to, maybe that crusty old CO that's been around for 25 years and never likes anything, you know, maybe he or she gets on board and says, "Yeah, maybe this stuff isn't so bad. Maybe I shortchanged it." You start to see some movement in your organization.
Yeah. And to jump to the other side about the comment about people not using something like our fatigue to fulfillment course as a Band-Aid for a gaping, gushing wound. SafetyNet is actually designed specifically for that, to say that you cannot just have a hammer to build a house. You have to have a bunch of tools and a bunch of other supplies, and it all has to fit together. So it really points to the fact that, for example, if you have facilities running at temperature of 110 degrees during the summer, you cannot expect people to be in their right mind, or freezing in the winter where the water freezes in the toilets and people are just freezing cold. It's not going to help with wellness. So that's why we built SafetyNet to say that it's multifaceted. You cannot have one little tool expected to do the whole job. And if we try to do that, it means we need more information and education to understand the complexity of the whole thing and all that contributes to wellness or takes away from wellness, and say, now let's address those things head on and not just use one little thing as a pacifier. It's not going to work. Not for very long. It may work for a little time, short time. Thank you.
One of the things that we didn't address, that I'm going to be honest with you, and you all know this, is one of the biggest obstacles to wellness, and that is overtime. and people having to work 16-hour shifts and going home exhausted. And, you know, it's hard to decompress after 8 hours. Doing it after 16 hours, where you're not only exhausted, mentally fatigued from what you did all day, but physically fatigued. And the number of people who die in car accidents on the way home because they fall asleep at the wheel. You know, it's as bad as suicides, and right up there with it, at least. Preventable death. Wasn't something that's really easy to write into standards. Part of it has to do with shortages, and hopefully if we can get a grip on attrition and we can hire enough people. I mean, most agencies have more positions available than they do bodies in them. You're short-staffed. Almost everybody is short-staffed. But hopefully if wellness programs are embraced and people are more well and they stay and you're not as short-staffed, it's going to cut down on some of that. But that was kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And we know it's a big problem. It's one of the biggest problems. It's really hard to tackle straight on, but it's certainly something that we acknowledge exists.
I think we will take, we'll field one more question here, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. And I know there's a lot of questions, and we didn't get to them all today. But just know that we're going to be, for those of you who came in late for this meeting, this webinar is going to be provided on our Desert Waters YouTube channel. And if you missed it in the beginning, we're going to be repeating this webinar in the coming weeks. It'll be the same content. So if you came in late or you missed it or you want to repeat, we will do a repeat of this, as well as the video is going to be online. So if your question didn't get answered, or if you think of something after the fact, bring it to the next meeting. And also we're going to be doing some Desert Waters webinars that are just going to be some AMA, Ask Me Anything about staff wellness. So be on the lookout for those as well. And we'd be happy to continue this discussion. And so Greg Morton's going to field our last question, and then we will sign off.
I just want to say, it actually, in response to everybody's participation today, I have come to the conclusion that this is the future of our profession. It may take longer than we want it to, but there just is there's no way to overlook the inherent consequences that are built into the profession. Walking away saying everything's fine, you know, how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. That's just a form of denial, and denial kills people. And anyway, this is in part, at least, the future of the profession. And I just wanted to end with that. Thanks, you guys.
I'd like to say thank you to everybody who made time to show up. And I know we had a little glitch there. We had to have you re-register, and I really appreciate your following through and doing that. And from now on, we're going to be using this platform, so it should be smooth sailing. But thanks for investing time, energy, and everything else you invested in being here with us today. And you are part of the future. So we want to invest in you. So thank you.
Again, you can go to safetynet.desertwaters.com and get all of the resources, all the data that we talked about. And if you want to if you have any more questions that you need answered offline, you can go to safetynet@desertwaters.com for email, and we will do our best to respond there as well. And you can reach out to us in any of the ways that you see on the screen as well, even by phone if you need to. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.